Sick.
Right?
Sick, all right. The only thing I will say about the election is this episode, the day this episode comes out, we may not know who actually won yet. And you know what? In 2020,
The day this episode comes out,
yeah,
I imagine that over the weekend.
I mean,
they'll
you would
have gotten
hope,
their
right?
things straightened out.
You would hope,
for the
right?
most part.
Yeah. So those of us who, or no, I suppose it comes out late Monday, Tuesday, whatever.
Right.
Depends on when I edit. But
On the day of recording, we still don't have
don't
complete
know.
results.
But I don't know. Yesterday is probably the least stressful election day of my life because I just went to work. I voted after work, though there was barely any lines, so that was fun. That was nice. Went to mass, came home, made dinner, drank a beer, and played video games, and it was good.
That sounds like a good quality day in my book.
Yeah, it was rather surprising. I was like, you know what? I voted, I did what I could, and now I'm just gonna give the country to God, and it'll all smooth sailing from here. So, and then work
And
was.
we also may not know until December what the final result is, because
if it
a
goes
lot
to
of
Supreme Court or
a
whatever.
lot of states are actually not mandating that you have your ballot in until December.
It's just
Oh,
what a crap show.
that is.
Oh well, the one
Given
thing we
the circumstances, it's not all that outlandish of an idea. But
yeah.
No.
I mean, nothing is an outlandish idea anymore.
In current
In
year.
current year.
2020.
there's
in
nothing new
present day
under the sun.
2020.
Oh, vanity of vanities.
Everything is vanity. Low key, Ecclesiastes is probably one of my favorite books of the Old Testament.
Just a salty guy being salty. Of
Yeah,
course,
it's
it's
just a guy going on a
Resonates.
salty rant. I'm like, you know what? I can relate to this. This guy gets it. It's funny. It's funny how election day was like the least stressful day of my week, and then now just work is everything is heating up. Like it'll all calm down by the end of next week. I'll hopefully have these projects finished and sent out. But when you have to make multiple revisions and you're still waiting on content and you just want to get the dang thing done because you've been working on it for 2 months and I'm sick of looking at it, it'd be nice to finish it. But come the holiday season, life should be a lot more chill. So
Well,
I'll
it
probably be
is-
complaining about being bored then.
well, it's North Dakota. It will be.
But
a
yeah,
lot
it'll
more
definitely be-
chill.
It was whopping 73 Degrees today.
I don't know. I think that might be the first time that you guys have been warmer than we have.
I know,
Oh.
and it's weird. I don't ever remember. We've had like warm days in November, December, but I don't ever remember it being in the 70s.
Things
in
heating up
November.
this election season, I see.
Yeah, boy. It was nice.
Yeah, we were in like the 60s today, but I
So-
called my mom because it's her birthday today,
hmm
and she's like, "Oh yeah, it was 74 out." And I'm like, "What?
What? We haven't done that in a while. I haven't done that in a while. It feels nice. I mean, our listeners are probably like, oh no. They remembered.
Or doing it along with us. You never know.
Since
One of the two listeners is probably doing it.
as he's listening to it. Gosh. I speaking of annoying things, over Halloween I went to a gathering at Newman House, and we played Bodies, which is basically Mafia / Among Us, but you actually walk around and physically kill. I know. I was thinking that the entire time. I did it once and nobody acknowledged it, and I was disappointed. But
Welcome to my world.
all around me are familiar faces. But oh shoot, I was telling a little story there. What was it?
Speaking of annoying things.
Oh, right. And so we were playing signs, or well, just in general, playing games. And I started saying I lost the game, and all the roommates of one of our listeners are like, "No, please, we hear this all the time. We have a house rule that there's got to be at least 10 minutes between you saying that." It's like, that's not how the game works.
The
So I openly
universal
defined
rule of the
defined
game
it.
is that it's a half hour between losses.
Yeah. But, oh well. Still made it happen. Gosh. There was, I don't know, what's new with you, Nathan?
Well, I was gonna go home for the Halloween weekend, but I had a younger brother who was sick, and we're like, maybe don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I drove back to my hometown regardless because I had to go vote. I did the scariest possible thing on Halloween.
Yeah.
So,
Voot!
I went and voted early. Then I came back, and you were there for what I did at the party.
Yep.
So I was there at the party with. I was like,
I was there for the
I stayed up in a
whole
long
thing.
time because daylight
Yeah,
savings
I
time.
was-
I had an actual.
Well, they had food.
They also had food. That is entirely true. And like,
Charlie, our buddy, made these bacon wrapped cheese and steak bites, like on
Dude.
toothpicks, which is
so good.
great stuff.
But aside from that, I've got a writing assignment I'm kind of cramming for right about now, because I have other things that feel more pressing, like equations I can get finished and have an end, then submit them by the time because I have them weekly. This has been rolling up for weeks, and it's like I'm a little bit of a procrastinator. I will admit, and so now I'm kind of cramming a little bit, but such is
Figured
college,
out.
I suppose. If you don't manage it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I have a minimum 8-page paper that's due on Tuesday that I essentially haven't started, so
I don't feel.
I think
bad
I've got you
anymore.
beat on that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is an 8-page paper, but I mean, just under a week. That's not terrible. It's not ideal, but that's not horrible.
It can be done.
Yeah.
It'll probably eat up my entire Saturday, but
I
it can
have
be done.
confidence in your abilities.
Speaking of procrastinating, I've also been playing our roommate Colton's copy of Super Mario Odyssey.
Oh yeah,
That has been a very
that's
fun
been kind of
time.
fun to watch.
Quite delightful. I think of the 3D Mario games, it wouldn't be a bad one to start with for you.
Yeah.
I mean, also Sunshine and Galaxy and 64, they're all good.
Did you end up getting the 3D All-Stars collection, Nathan?
I did get, and I
Okay.
played Mario 64 for the first time, completely, all 120 stars. So that was fun. It was hard.
In
It
about
was
like a week.
not a week.
Okay, 2 weeks.
Yeah. I can slam games when I don't have anything else.
In
really
remarkably
pressing to do.
little time. Like 2 weeks with about maybe, I don't know, a couple hours a day.
Yeah, get
You
it.
can just knock it out.
I mean, Mario 64 isn't a 40-hour game by any means. It took
No,
me a
no.
long time to finish Dark Souls comparatively.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like, and
And
that
then-
game took me 60 hours.
And Celeste
Or
and different
more.
things.
Right, so it depends on the game, and Mario 64 isn't.
Mario 64 is like the first venture into 3D for Mario. So if you've played any of the other 3D Mario games, it's much easier. It
Right.
was the first iteration of the experiment. And
And
so kind of everything that it's about transfers
Right,
skill-wise from the other ones.
I had played Sunshine was my first 3D Mario, and I had also played Galaxy, which is a really good one. So going back to 64, there was like a lot of things that's like, oh yeah, I appreciate what this game did, but also it's a little clunky going back to it in the
It's
current
from
year.
what, 1996?
I believe that might be the year. Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit,
Donkey Kong 64 was 97, I believe.
Okay, so maybe Mario 64 is
It's around
earlier.
that time.
But yeah.
was that a side scroller?
No, it
Donkey
was
Kong 64?
3D.
No, it was done by the same guys that did Banjo-Kazooie. So
Oh, sure.
it was another 3D collecting platformer game.
Gotcha.
120 bananas, incidentally.
Uh-huh.
In other Nintendo news, Nathan and I tried the Hyrule Warriors demo
Yeah.
with co-op, which was pretty fun. I was impressed. I didn't think it was really going to be. I thought it was basically,
Hack and slash Zelda.
yeah. But I mean,
Which
like,
it was.
but it still felt like you were playing Breath of the Wild and just mowing down enemies.
They did
But I mean, it's faster paced for sure. You can do a lot more damage in one hit. It's satisfying in a different way, but it's I don't know. It still manages to keep the atmosphere.
I think did a really good job of transferring. Like the core gameplay loop is very much that that Koei Tecmo Dynasty Warriors experience, but everything around it is so steeped in Breath of the Wild's influences. Like it just feels like they tried their darndest to make it fit in as well as possible seamlessly into the world of the original. And so it really shows. Like it exudes Breath of the Wild in like its presentation and in all the little, like every level has a couple Koroks you can find, and like all the weapons, there's crafting and cooking elements to it in like the side
There's
modes.
quote unquote side quests, but those are more like, did you collect the items? Okay, and then you do this little thing and you get this upgrade.
You unlock.
You don't actually physically go into something; you do it from the map.
I
But
mean,
which I kind of appreciate. Sometimes like side quests they can get kind of bogged down in.
Which,
but
if you don't have the materials, you could go back into a level and grind for that thing, and then go back to it, which is kind of more of that Dynasty Warriors influences. But yeah, and it's also just fun, particularly in co-op. I can imagine like navigating the later stages as it gets harder.
it's definitely a demo because there are moments when you're doing co-op when you're fighting. I don't know, like probably 200 enemies or something like that.
It's
It lags a little bit, but
I mean, it's also the Switch.
true. Doesn't have the highest processing power in the world.
But in single player, it didn't drop a single frame when you were doing the
Yeah.
tutorial level.
I think that's where it probably will work the best.
But I also think it's the most fun with another person. Because I'd played
The demo had about an hour, like the first kind of
Oh yeah,
intro section. For Zelda lore stuff, it added some really interesting.
I'm not sure how I feel about the time travel elements and stuff,
Yeah,
but
it's precedented in Zelda lore.
well, yeah. But I think the precedent it set in Zelda lore messes up the timeline, and it's like,
Which was already messed up.
well, yeah. So anyway, I'm interested to see how that pans out. I'm not sure if I'm going to get it at launch or if I'm going to wait until, well, it won't go on sale on Black Friday or anything.
Yeah, unless they surprise us. Who knows?
I don't know. Anyway,
Cool stuff. Looking forward to seeing more.
that'll be fun to pick up later.
In other game
what's,
news, I played the Star Wars Battlefront 2, which has been out for the new one has been out for I don't know, like 2 years at this point, but it was on sale, like the whole thing. So I got it, played it. It was actually pretty fun. Apparently the campaign is canon, which I don't know is a good enough story. It plays a lot like the old one, but less clunky. So I actually kind of enjoyed it. And over the couple of years of development or whatever, they got rid of like there's a whole microtransactions controversy and stuff like that. But I don't know. I kind of enjoyed it. I was a fan of the original Battlefront 2, so this one was sort of a good homage and added some valuable gameplay elements, and it was just kind of fun. Wouldn't have got it full price. I also got, and maybe this will merit an episode. We'll see. What also was on sale was Jedi the Fallen Order game.
You got Fallen Order? Nice.
I did, yeah. It was half off.
That'll be your first experience of a Souls-like.
Yeah, that I have heard. I've heard it's kind of pulls like influence from Dark Souls / Breath of the Wild in some ways.
It'll make your transition to playing Dark Souls easier. So you'll be used to it.
Yeah.
Because you will play Dark Souls.
At some
Someday.
point.
Someday.
Yeah, we'll see.
But it is not this day.
It's
When
not
you
this day.
become, it will be your rite of passage to become a true gamer.
True.
A true gamer. Well, that and I have to play Skyrim.
Skyrim is like something you can sit on forever and not exhaust.
Because it's pretty timeless. Well, and a time sink as well.
It's not like you've got to beat Skyrim to be a real gamer. All you have to do is like play Skyrim. You just have to experience it because that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's really an experience, not so much an obstacle to be conquered.
Yeah.
But let me know when you finish Fallen Order, because I'm gonna want to do a playthrough of that at some point too, and also no spoilers because I don't like those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Maybe you'll get to hover over my shoulder and laugh at my
Yes.
misfortunes as I. Yeah, I don't know. We'll
Well, you have a Steam controller?
no.
Okay.
I had an Xbox One, but I left it at home so
Okay, maybe that-
siblings could play some of my Steam games.
Gotcha. If you want to do it on controller, well, we can do it that way. The characters in the story we're about to talk about also had some great obstacles to overcome.
And they're also siblings.
Yeah.
So there you go.
We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
Today, we are talking about something. This show is actually more or less, I don't know. This show is what got us started on our media conversations. Like the whole idea is like, we should do a podcast someday. And I think would be a good episode for a podcast. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, the anime. So roughly a year and a half after actually finishing, or was it about a year? A little more than a year and a half or whatever.
We finished it while I was still living at the men's. No, we finished it right after we moved into our new house.
Yeah. I think that was like
we
one of the
finished
first.
the show. Yeah.
Yeah. But we
We
watched.
started doing the podcast like 6 months after that.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
Mhm.
And so, of course, we had to wait until roughly 6 months into the podcast to actually review it. But here we are. So, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Now, what is set in, what's the name of the country again?
Amestris.
Amestris.
Yes.
In this world, it's sort of a vaguely European 18th century civilization.
I would
And
say it
in
feels
this country,
more like
you
a.
have people who
James,
are what?
he was talking.
I-
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry,
yeah,
my
is
headphones.
Your
crap out.
headphone bugging out again.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say it's more like an early 20th century technologically because they have cars, they have jeeps.
Yeah,
they've
that's true.
got- It feels
like-
like it, but it also doesn't.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
It also feels vaguely futury, but that's also because they have alchemy, and so.
Mhm.
But it's like.
It's very
vaguely-
hard to pin down the time.
Which
It's
but-
not steampunk, but it's kind of like a
Industrial
Gilded Age
Revolution.
punk.
Yeah, Gilded Age punk. That's a good way to.
So in this country, you have these people called alchemists who can manipulate matter to make different shapes and do different things and whatnot by connecting with the energy and so forth and rearranging matter, more or less how it works, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, kind of earthbending almost.
Yeah. Basically, everyone's an earthbender in this world.
Well, not
Except
everyone.
everyone
Other
that's
people
a-
can be.
Right. I mean, all the alchemists are earthbenders, more or less.
But then you got the fire alchemist, and you've got the
They all have their like unique shtick that they.
right.
That
They all-
they're
They all
specialized in.
specialize in different things.
Yeah. So in this country, you have two young boys, Edward and Alphonse Elric, who their father left when they were very young. They don't really know why. And their
What he-
mother becomes terminally ill and dies.
Mm-hmm.
And since their father taught them a little bit of alchemy, they're like, you know what? We miss her so much. I bet if we put all the matter that a human body is comprised of together and do this special thing I found in a book, we could bring our mother back and make a human body. Welp, this goes horribly wrong because something that'll be, pretty central in the whole world in this
Plot.
show is you don't want to mess with human life. So they do this thing.
And also, there's this idea of the conservation of matter and energy, right?
Yes. Yep.
Where, you can't gain or lose matter. You can only change form.
You can't
or
gain or
exchange.
lose life as well. You must make an exchange.
Right. And so, in exchange for trying to bring this thing to life, Edward loses his arm and a
and-
leg,
And,
and Alphonse loses his entire body.
yep.
But Edward, before Alphonse's soul completely dissipates, traps him in a suit of armor using a alchemy seal.
Yep. Which will maintain its connection with the physical world as long as this physical seal exists. So if you destroy the seal, you sever this connection and you're gonzo. So that happens. And these kids are young. So it's just a horrible experience. And then the government
I think-
alchemists show up and they're like, what the hell happened here? Or what the heck happened here?
It's okay. It's okay. We are,
Yeah.
we are allowed to do one naughty word per podcast.
Yeah.
You're at your limit.
Not like catching
You're at
foxes.
your limit, boy.
You're
not
on
like
thin ice.
Bucko. It's not like catching foxes where they'll just go off, but like the podcast.
I mean, we could be that. We would just have to change our iTunes designation, but
yeah.
regardless, continue.
Oh, well. The government shows up and is like, okay, these kids did something really messed up, so I have to keep an eye on them. But they're also talented alchemists, so we should sort of try to, because the government sort of manages the alchemists, and they are technically like a part of the army and whatnot. So they take them in and teach them alchemy and things like that, and eventually they become like fully licensed alchemists, even though they're still like teenagers at this point. So their main Edward and Alphonse, their main driving force. They're another thing too, because of this mystical experience. Normally, you have to draw what's called a transmutation circle on something that you intend to manipulate. Edward can make this by folding his hands together. It can make a transmutation circle basically between his hands, and then touch something and transmute it instead of drawing the circle all the way out like most people have to do. So yeah, they're talented alchemists. They get their licensing and stuff, and they set out to try to figure out a way to get Alphonse's body back, and that's kind of the main. That's kind of how their main goal in the show.
Right, because when you are a suit of armor, you can't really have human physical experiences like touch or taste. So...
Yeah. And as they explore the country, meet people, and like try to learn different things about alchemy and how to get the body back, they start to notice things are a little off with their country. Now, Amestris had got into a war, kind of
Quite a few, to be exact.
Yeah, but one particular where they wiped out an entire country. I'm trying to remember what the name of the country was that they conquered.
Yeah, it was. I'm looking at
Jing? No, wait, no. Jing is
No.
That's a different empire. The Earth Kingdom.
Ishval.
Ishval. They basically annihilated the country of Ishval, under the leadership of the Führer. Which
they didn't kill everyone, but they sort of, it was a pretty
they
merciless
decimated it,
conquering of the place.
Yeah. And this saw extensive use of alchemists, and so the state alchemists are all kind of, to varying degrees, scarred by what they did. And are trying to deal with it in their own ways.
Most of them, anyway.
Yeah,
And then a lot of
because it
people
involved a lot of highly unethical destruction of human life and
Right.
different things that happened in the war.
And of course, you have a lot of people in Ishval who are bitter about the whole thing, and a lot of prejudice against Ishval people by the people in Amestris. So it's like there's a
And
lot of
vice versa.
tension there.
Yep. But the boys start to notice there's something a little off. There's eventually these creatures called homunculi show up, and they're like crazy powerful. And like they each of the ones they encounter have like these otherworldly abilities, like shape shifting, or like the ability to eat very large things,
Just regenerate from
regeneration,
basically nothing.
things like that. And this is all kind of happening in the background, and it's implied there's some sort of conspiracy that goes all the way to the top with this, so it's pretty sketch. But another character they encounter over time is this one Ishvalan guy who is also a sort of alchemist, but alchemy involves creation or destruction and creation in a sort of loop. So you destroy something and remake it into something else. This guy, his whole deal is he stops on the destruction side of things, and his whole mission is to one by one systematically wipe out the alchemists as a sort of reckoning for what they did to his country.
And he's got like these destructive alchemy circles tattooed all across one arm. So like he touches a thing and it just disintegrates into he Thanos snaps it by touching it.
So he kind of makes repeat appearances throughout the show.
Scar. That's the guy's
Scar,
name. He's got
yep,
this
that's
great
the guy's
big
name.
X-shaped scar across his face.
Left over from the war, where he lost his whole family, especially his brother, who was into alchemy. So yeah, there's some other characters they meet along the way. There's Colonel Mustang, who's sort of keeping an eye on the boys, and then
He's
let's
the
see,
fire alchemist, right?
yeah, the fire
Yes.
alchemist.
He's got like a.
He's really
transmutation
powerful
circle
unless it's
glove.
raining or it's mildly wet. Then he can't really do anything.
Right, but he's got a transmutation circle on his glove that lets him PK fire people.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good.
Except he's not as annoying as Ness.
Yeah.
No.
He's cool.
And they have various friends in the army that are kind of their trustworthy, companions and whatnot. Especially the one guy, Colonel Hughes, I think, right?
I don't think he's a colonel, but I forget what his rank is. But yeah, Hughes is his name.
Yeah, he is just like this sort of super friendly guy in the army. He's got a family, wife and a daughter, and he just kind of sort of. Everyone else is focused on the boys and their alchemy. He's just like, you know what? These kids have had a messed up childhood. I'm going to sort of give them a taste of family life and be friends with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so their family's very hospitable to the boys, and he's kind of energetic and like pretty peppy and.
Also, there's another major character. Because if we mentioned that that Edward lost an arm and a leg in the deal, and so he has had his arm and leg replaced by automail, just basically like cyborg robot
Prosthetics.
And his automail mechanic is a young girl about his age named Winry,
Yep.
and they've got they make gaga eyes at each other from time to time.
Her grandmother raised the boys after their mother died for a little bit, and then they started training to become alchemists.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's a character that recurs and is kind of important at times.
Yeah. So very close childhood friend of theirs.
And maybe more question mark?
Winry's parents died in the Ishvalan Civil War.
Yep.
They were doctors,
Mm-hmm.
just out there to help save lives on both sides. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Doc-
they
Doctors
kind of
without
got caught in the
borders.
crossfire, so she also grew up orphaned, more or
Yep.
less.
Yep.
We have so much in common.
Yeah.
You're an orphan. We're an orphan.
Yeah. So as time goes on, it's sort of episodic in the sense that they have these different encounters
Yeah.
along the way.
Early on in the show, it's very episodic, where they just go from like
Place to
incident to
place.
incident,
Mhm.
just kind of encountering different.
They deal with sort of
elements
this
of-
weird cult in this one town, especially this girl who's like a devotee of this cult,
Yeah,
where it turns out this guy is kind of a phony alchemist who is, trying to exert control over the people. He's a little more powerful than he should be. So something is a little off about him.
right.
But they kind of, show him up, and then he gets taken away or
Do
whatever.
they find out he hasn't a philosopher's stone, or is it
They
like
think he does. They
Okay.
see this little red gemstone on a ring that he has,
Mm-hmm.
and they've heard rumors about this thing called the Philosopher's Stone.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know a lot about it. Nobody really knows a lot about it.
I mean,
They're kind of
in real life alchemy, the philosopher's stone was supposed to grant eternal life and turn other things into gold and stuff. So
Yeah,
it's
ridiculously-
inspired by that.
ridiculously powerful.
It turns out the one he had was sort of a fake.
Yeah.
It wasn't as effective as a real one, but it
It still had some
it
power
still
to it
it still did something.
Yeah,
that
it was-
enhanced his
It was like a
otherwise
small
mediocre
battery
ability.
version. It was like
Yeah, it enhanced his otherwise mediocre abilities.
it was given to him by Lust, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
the
I think
homunculi
so.
that we mentioned earlier are all named after the seven deadly sins.
Yeah.
So you have
Lust and greed are the main ones
That you run
no,
into.
Lust and gluttony.
lust
Or like,
and gluttony.
Gluttony is like this tubby short guy who's her lackey kind of.
Yep.
Not very bright.
Not
No.
terribly.
And-
He just wants to eat things.
Yep. Lust is kind of a seductress, as the name might imply. Also a shapeshifter. Greed.
Envy is the shapeshifter.
Envy's a
Yeah,
shapeshifter.
envy's a
yeah.
shapeshifter.
Yeah.
Envy's kind of the third one they come
Lust
across.
could kind of shapeshift a little bit too. Or no. You're right.
No,
yeah,
no.
it's envy. Envy's a shapeshifter. Greed is
They meet him a little bit later. He's like running this underground gang of homunculus people.
well, or no, not homunculus, but like people
Chimera
who have been
Chimera people, sure.
chimeras.
Yeah. Who are like fused with animal parts and have
Yeah.
extra abilities.
There's one
and stuff.
episode where the boys come across this guy.
Who's made a chimera that can talk in the past and
Out of
And-
his daughter.
Well, he made one out of his wife and an animal, and then
All
he did it
sorts
to
of
his
people he
daughter.
was close
and
to.
that was messed up. That
It was all kinds of
like
messed up.
the third episode in it. It hits you with the hard
Oof.
moral dilemmas, and it's like, oof, that's rough.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, this agreed. His deal is he can sort of create this carbon suit of armor around himself, so he's very difficult to defeat.
right.
It's not impossible, but very difficult.
They use some clever outside the box thinking to defeat him. That they have to do that for all the guys actually. I think the last one we meet in the show is Sloth, who's
No.
no
No, Sloth is what a pain.
right.
The big hulking.
They meet him
hulking guy.
a lot later in the show though,
Yeah,
and he just is.
I believe Pride is the last one.
Pride.
Oh, they officially talk
Pride, and then
Well, Wrath is
Wrath and Pride are two like
they're connected.
yeah.
Yes, they are. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Anyway,
Let's see.
there's the 7 deadly sins for you.
So as time goes on, they start to uncover more and more of like sort of this grand conspiracy, and they're not really quite sure what it entails exactly, but they know it's somehow connected to their search for the Philosopher's Stone.
Earlier in the show, in researching the Philosopher's Stone, they discover that in order to make one as powerful as it is, you have to sacrifice human souls. That is where the Philosopher's Stone draws its power.
Yep.
It's all part of the law of equivalent exchange,
Yep.
which is kind of the governing principle of alchemy.
Right.
Something equal must be offered in order to change
And
forms.
turns out human souls are extremely valuable.
Yeah. So in sort of their friend Hughes is kind of digging into the fishy stuff going on in the government they think might be connected. And he gets murdered by one of the homunculi, but they don't know that. So it's sort of a tragic death. Everyone really feels the loss because he was kind of a great guy, even if he was a little annoying sometimes. Especially the boys who like kind of feel this duty now to kind of watch out and like avenge him and also look out for his family now that he's gone, since he did a lot to try to, help them sort of maintain their humanity. They get the nickname Fullmetal as sort of a joke because Edward is partially metallic with his prosthetics, and then Alphonse is entirely made of metal now because he's trapped in a suit of armor. His soul's trapped in a suit of armor. But like the guy sort of saw them in their humanity, or Hughes saw them in their humanity and tried to give them sort of a normal family experience to the extent he could. So it's a pretty tragic loss. And then as the show goes on, there's flashbacks and we learn more about what happened in the war and different things like that. Let's see, what's like the next big plot point?
Well, they talk to their old teacher about the Philosopher's Stone and how to get Edward's or Alphonse's body back. And she's a fun character.
They learn that she also, once upon a time, committed the great taboo,
Which
of
is
trying to
make a human soul or a human body, yeah.
Because
her baby died,
yeah,
and she tried to recreate.
she had a
her baby.
miscarriage or a stillborn child, and so she tried to bring it back, but that caused her like some of her internal organs, so she's constantly coughing up blood throughout the series.
Yeah. Incredibly brazen, tough character, and her husband is like this massive, gentle giant guy who's kind of one of my favorite characters.
What's that guy from The Emperor's New Groove?
Kronk.
Oh, Kronk.
No, Pacha.
No, not Kronk.
Pacha.
Pacha.
Yeah,
He
he's
reminds me of Pacha.
a lot. Also, Colonel Armstrong, just ridiculously buff,
The strong arm
super.
alchemist.
Yeah.
He's fun.
Is he the same actor as voice actor as All Might in?
Yes, he is.
Okay,
Okay.
that does.
I knew
make sense,
I knew the
actually.
voice sounded familiar. At any rate,
There's just a bunch of other side characters at the
Yeah,
Like
they're kind of
police.
fun. Different alchemists and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they sort of start to build the circle of people they feel like they can trust because they find out. I guess one of the big reveals is that the homunculi all refer to this guy as father.
Yeah, there's this one character they all call their father, and he's calling all the shots. So they got to discover who this guy is.
Pulling the strings under the surface, literally under the surface, like
He's living beneath the capital city of Amestris. So.
And they have a run in with him, and they realize he's just kind of crazy powerful, and they have a fight and lose, and different things happen. What else? They also find out the big reveal is that the Führer, the leader of Amestris, is a homunculi himself, and his quote-unquote son is also homunculus named Pride. So you have Pride and Wrath to round out the deadly sins. Another character the boys run into along the way, though, is this Xingyan prince named Lanfan.
Right.
So in this...
Lanfan is the girl.
Oh.
Yeah, Lanfan's his bodyguard.
His name is...
Oh, you're right.
Ling.
Ling.
Yep.
Ling, and then what's the little girl's name?
May.
May, with her panda.
So there's a couple characters from a faraway, vaguely Chinese-inspired country.
They want to find a philosopher's stone, I think, right? So they can
Right.
kind of win the dynasty battle to become the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how the succession works in their country. They have to sort of prove there's these big families, and they have to prove their worth and ascend to the throne or whatever. But at any rate, over the course of time, greed sort of falls. He's sort of a loose cannon among the homunculi. He doesn't always listen to father.
He's out for himself, as greed does.
Yeah. So
he's
father...
He's entirely self-serving.
Yeah.
Because he's greed.
So father sends Wrath, the Führer, after him to kind of bring him in and,
make him toe the line.
Make him toe the line. And so he sort of remakes... Each of the homunculi have at their center a philosopher's stone, we find out. So, which allows them, gives them
power. Yeah,
their incredible power. They regenerate from basically, as long as the philosopher's stone remains intact, they can regenerate from that. So it brings greed in, and he's not listening. So he basically remakes greed using his philosopher's
He melts
stone.
him down, like dips him in a vat of molten whatever, and pulls out his philosopher's stone.
Yep.
Kind of gruesome.
Yeah. And over the course of the show, long story short, Ling gets the guy's philosopher's stone, and he's sort of fused with greed's philosopher's stone, like controlling his body, but he's still kind of a Jekyll and Hyde back and forth thing going on there.
Right. Where sometimes it's Ling in control, sometimes it's greed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they cooperate. A lot of the times they disagree.
Greed through the show sort of makes a enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of relationship with the Elric's brothers.
Also, he doesn't... Greed as a character doesn't like make relationships with humans. He sees them as his things.
Playthings, more or less. Like,
yeah.
His whole thing is he's greedy and he wants, to own everything in the world, and so and not be beholden to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So time and time again, they sort of have a common interest now and again with the guy. Another thing too, they realize is that this father guy looks kind of like their dad, who shows back up. And I guess we can just jump straight to this. So, years and years and years ago, there was another country that has since been completely wiped out, and we find out that the boy's father is actually ridiculously old and was from this country. He was a slave in this place where there's like this weird creature in a bottle. He's like, hey,
alchemy.
if you, I'll teach you alchemy and do these different things, and then if you help me out, I can make you super powerful. I can make you immortal. So it's like, okay, interesting. And so basically what happens is this entire country gets turned into a transmutation circle. And this creature sucks everybody's soul up into this massive philosopher's stone and becomes ridiculously powerful. And this creature, his whole quest is to become God, basically, and rule over.
This creature is the one they call Father.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The homunculi.
And he kind of uses the Elric's father as a template to make himself a new body. He's like, "Oh, you're immortal now. You're welcome. I gave you some power and souls. Like, oh, have fun, do your thing. I'm gonna, keep going in my quest to, become God, ridiculously powerful." And the boys find out that slowly Father has been turning Emestris into a massive transmutation circle.
Like even bigger than the first one.
Yeah.
The first one was just one city.
Mm-hmm.
This is like an entire continent, basically.
Mm-hmm. And so he's planning to make another bigger Philosopher's Stone with the millions of people in this entire country. And so the boys and their father shows back up, and it turns out the reason why he left is because he was roaming around looking for different ways to try and stop Father from enacting his plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so they figure out how to make a reverse transmutation circle, and they do all these different things with their allies and whatnot. And so along with Colonel Mustang and their friends in the army, they stage a coup to unseat Wrath, who is the Führer, like the leader of the country. And they get into a battle with the homunculi. Different crap goes down, fights happen, good people die, bad people die. And they end up in another final showdown with Father. Yeah. And it appears, I believe, doesn't it?
It's like a really trippy all hope is lost moment where he actually does complete the transmutation circle and starts making the stone and stuff. And Edward goes back when they first did the forbidden alchemy to try and create a human life. Both Alphonse and Edward had this kind of out of body experience where they met with this shadowy creature or like being from like this realm between living and dead, like this white void, and there's like a big door, and they learn the secrets to alchemy. It's like imprinted on their soul now or something.
Yep.
So they had that experience, and that's why they're like naturally.
And in this weird in between world, Edward saw Alphonse's body.
Right, because he had another one of those experiences midway through the series.
Yeah,
too.
Sort of emaciated looking, but evidently still alive. So they found out his body wasn't disintegrated. It was just sort of sucked up into this world. So they're like, okay, if we make another exchange, we could get Alphonse's body back.
Right. But I think he have like that kind of experience at the end of the show when the Philosopher's Stone's being created and all the world's being sucked up or whatever.
So basically, Edward talks to this weird light creature, and he's like, you know what? Okay, make me powerful. I can defeat Father, set things right, and then can we get Alphonse's body back? He's like, yeah, but what are you going to exchange? He's like, yeah, I'll give up my alchemy, my ability to do alchemy to get Alphonse's body back. And so Edward gets Super Saiyan and defeats Father along with the boy's father and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
They defeat Father, and then there's like this reverse transmutation circle they made to counteract the Father's plan and whatnot, and it's successful. They defeat him, and all the homunculi are destroyed, and they basically free the country.
Up to this point, basically, but
what's that?
Like all the homunculus.
Yeah, along the way in the final battle, the homunculus had all been defeated and whatnot. So
it's revealed to us that the homunculi are sort of
pieces of Father's.
He takes part of his nature out to create them.
Mm-hmm.
In this case,
he was trying to remove these deadly qualities from himself to make himself perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole goal of like separating lust out of himself, greed out of himself, envy, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's like he sort of threw away anything that made him sort of human.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So
and it turns out these human souls aren't all. They're not happy about being trapped in this guy and having their life force used as power, and so that's kind of partially how
like
they
sort of sentient.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And Hohenheim, who's the boy's father, like he also has some souls at his disposal, more or less. He has a Philosopher's Stone,
But
and like he knows all of their names, and like he
has actually communicated with them and tries to learn about them. And
right.
they lend their power to him in the final battle to help him defeat Father,
yeah.
instead of taking it from them by force the way Father does.
Yeah. After they defeat Father, Edward gets sucked back up into the in-between world again, and he gives up his ability to do alchemy in order for Alphonse to get his body back, which works. Yeah. And they basically live happily ever after. Edward and Winry are basically implied to like, all right, let's get married.
Yeah.
And they're going to travel the world and try to come up with new ways to do alchemy.
Because
they
the
discover
other
Chinese have a different way of doing alchemy that isn't alchemy. They call it alkahestry instead of, like, I forget what the exact.
There's like they have to feel the dragon's pulse or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing too, they like Father had been building these networks and crap under the city, and he's also been doing this thing to sort of block the chi of the ground. I believe something like that. I forget.
Anyway, so it's
crazy
implied,
stuff.
There's more work to be done at the end
To
of the
sort of
series.
create, like, as it's implied that the alchemy. Oh, and then Scar shows up and helps fight Homunculi and sort of has a redemption arc of his own and stuff like that. Sort of forgot about him, but like it's implied that the alchemy that the people in Amestris have been doing is sort of incomplete and sort of not like a full use of it.
Right, that it came from Father, and that when he wanted them to not do alchemy to fight him, he could just nullify it.
Yep. Now let's see, how did they get around that again? I think it was through
I think it was through the
like she and like using a slightly different waveform of energy or something like that. I forget. But anyway, the end. They defeat Father, restore balance in the Force, and go off in search of new ways of doing alchemy that are to help humanity instead of bring destruction.
That's a very general overview.
Yeah, very general. There's different character moments that happen.
There's like how many episodes in this show?
60 something, 64 or 5.
So it's longish.
A lot goes on. In
It's
those
medium.
episodes, too.
It's
Medium,
decidedly
yeah.
medium.
Yeah. And it has a definite endpoint too. Like the series has since concluded. Yeah, I guess another point to get back to the Elric brothers, who are the main characters. Edward is short and has stunted growth, and we find out that because of weird things that happened when they did the transmutation thing, his body is providing Alphonse's body in the in-between world with life force to continue staying alive, even though kind of emaciated and barely alive. So that's why he's kind of stunted and short. But over the course of the story, Alphonse and Edward are very much like, the main thing that drives them is like their love for each other and their desire to sort of restore one another back to their normal bodily forms and like undo the horrible thing that they did to try to bring their mother back.
Which later in the show they discover that it probably wasn't actually their mother.
Right,
it was just something that looked like a human. When people die, they die, and there's no.
It's a weird sort of homunculus creature that they need a Philosopher's Stone to bring life to, and then like Father uses an army of these creatures to, like that's the reason why it's not allowed, is because they create these sort of inhuman creatures.
Right. So they weren't even doing it right.
Yeah.
They weren't even going to do what they wanted set out to do in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple really good episodes with Alphonse where he's not sure that he's him.
Uh-huh.
He's like, maybe I'm just a suit of armor that thinks he's Alphonse.
Mm-hmm.
So they have he has this existential crisis about what's the nature of a soul. What am I? What I am?
I think one of the homunculi sort of plants that seed in
No.
him.
I don't think it was a homunculus.
Or
It
no,
was another armor guy. Because there was like
there's like these weird
in the
ungodly.
grand
the
conspiracy
chopper.
of things.
Yeah.
There was like this prison
Prison
alchemy,
laboratory.
Yeah, this prison lab where alchemists were
performing these unholy experiments trying to create a philosopher's stone.
Right. And so there's a couple of crazy, murderous guys that were in this prison that they used to make a philosopher's stone and then transferred their bodies into suits of armor.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this one guy, the butcher guy, who's just like this creepy suit of armor guy who shows up from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another one in that episode too. So there, and I think it's the butcher who puts it in Alphonse's mind that maybe you aren't what they say you are.
Yeah, he's like sort of a psycho. Yeah, so that's where that came from.
So there's some like really good exploration of like philosophical.
Yeah, it's very
topics.
deep philosophical, ethical questions raised. And it sort of echoes a lot of the sort of ethical science, sort of secular humanist scientism that took root in the 20th century. A lot of crazy, experiments and messing around with like human beings, genetics research, and then, psychology and different things that happen. I guess those notes sort of came to me as I was watching the show, like these different crazy experiments like the Japanese would perform on war prisoners and different things like that, the Holocaust and things like that. So sort of one video I watched that analyzed is sort of they framed it as sort of a commentary, kind of a commentary on faith and reason somewhat. And like reason being coupled, religion and science, I guess, would be more accurate. So they showed like science, when unbridled, can result in like these horrible atrocities against humanity. And then like the only evidence they showed for the religion side of it when it gets unbridled is sort of like the fanaticism of this cult they come across in the first few episodes.
And there's also the religion of Ishval that made them kind of somewhat confrontationally warlike.
Yeah.
It's vaguely a Middle Eastern inspired country.
Yeah.
So there's kind of that going on.
And the boys are kind of decidedly atheistic, or at least Edward is. They're like, I don't know, I just do alchemy and that's what I know. I trust science and things like that. But over the course of the show, they're like, okay, there's some things like there's this episode too where they help this family where this lady gives birth to a baby, and they're just like, okay,
yeah,
maybe there's more to life. Maybe there's more than just science here. Like you can't really transmute a human soul.
Right, and yet it comes from nothing in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like that was a really neat. It was like a non-plot fillery episode, but it really
it explored the theme, the main theme. Yeah.
It's a non-plot episode, but
another
it's
point
not
the video
a
made
filler
too is like
episode.
so it goes from like there's the fanaticism side of religion, and then there's like the horrible atrocities of science. And at the end of the movie, they're like, okay, we need to find a way that keeps everything in balance, between the supernatural and the natural. So instead of to prevent these sort of atrocities from happening, and also do new things to make people's lives better, because you can also use alchemy to like heal people and do different good things for the world, but it can also be used for great evil. So
right, so with
I thought that video had a good analysis of the series.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess we can get into what are some highlights of the show for you guys before we get into the transcendental analysis?
The Miracle of Birth episode was definitely one of mine.
that was a good one.
It is kind of abrupt and interrupts the plot, but it is so very on point in terms of what the show is ultimately about, that it's just great. It gives Edward and Alphonse this chance to be human for a second, and just like care for someone else in this potentially dangerous activity. Childbirth wasn't a surefire thing in those days.
Yep.
So,
and it's interesting, like, even though Edward is like sort of this spunky, chip on his shoulder, pretty aggressive dude, every now and again his softer side comes out, and he's sort of in awe of like the miracle
of nature,
but the miracle of childbirth and life and things like that. especially in that
Oh,
episode.
That was a really cool episode for him, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, it's interesting to see. Winry isn't terribly involved in a lot of the stuff that goes on in the show,
Mm-hmm.
but whenever she shows up, she gives him a good talking to for breaking his automail.
Mm-hmm.
But she's like this great supporting role that,
Yeah.
if only for her sake, they want to come back in one piece. You
Mhm.
know, next time we see you, I'm gonna have my brother's body back. I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like they have a solid support group.
Yeah.
And even after the police guy dies,
Mm-hmm. Hughes.
After Hughes dies,
Maze Hughes.
they go back and visit his family. Winry kind of shows up and takes care of their family from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Which I suppose we're getting into the goodness part.
Yeah.
It's like there's just a lot of really solid characters that feel like they have depth to them.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciated the world building in the show, and like it sort of sets up the rules of the world, and then explores them and reveals new things about them. But
it's kind of the primo example of hard magic systems.
mm-hmm.
For those who might not be familiar, a hard magic system is like one in which there are pretty well-defined limitations and capacities of the power of the world,
Mm-hmm.
contrasted to a soft magic system where it's like Lord of the Rings. Magic is a soft magic system in Lord of the Rings where, you know, Gandalf never says, "Oh, I can't do this because I lack the sufficient magic power," or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's very loose. So,
Mhm.
but the thing that makes hard magic systems cool is they set up the rules right away, and then the growth of the character is sort of built around understanding their own limitations in
Mhm.
light of the fact of the world.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting how often they'll come to an insurmountable challenge and they'll have to like think outside the box with with the rules and limitations they have in order to overcome this
Yeah.
crazy juggernaut who just won't stop and keeps digging, and they're like, we gotta stop Sloth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so some of the growth of the characters too is like they have sort of this confidence. Like every once in a while, I kind of get the feel that like, okay, we're pretty naturally gifted at this. Like, what all can we learn? But they're constantly like, forced to reckon with their limitations.
And it gets to the point where the two brothers completely understand their roles, like in relationship, in terms of like fighting the guys, and like
Mm-hmm.
to the point where Alphonse, like
He's very much the younger brother.
he is,
But he's sort of
which
the
is funny
heart-
because he's like the huge guy.
Yeah, he's the heart and the muscle, and Edward is sort of the brains and the fierceness.
Right. So earlier in the show, they kind of clash about, but I want to be involved in this or that.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end of the show, they have this real teamwork where Alphonse volunteers to do
This
his
sort of
job, even though it's
brotherly
Yeah,
complementarity.
yeah. So I thought that's cool.
Yeah. I guess
One thing that I also want to touch on that I don't think really fits into the transcendental categories is the motif of the eye.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So there's like the portal that leads to the dimension, the white, in between dimension thing that is accessed by this eye-shaped portal, and it's not even just the shape; it like looks like an eye.
Yeah.
More
Was
like
it
a
the
cat
Eye of
but-
Truth? I believe is what.
Yeah,
they call
the
it,
Eye
right?
of Truth is what they call it.
Yeah.
But Pride is kind of composed of a bunch of small eyes that kind
Right.
of
His power is
work
he's got,
around
like,
in the
these-
shadows.
these
Also,
shadow
gluttony is
tendrils.
one giant Eye of Truth that sucks up everything.
Oh yeah, and they get sucked
It
up
was
into
like
him
a
for couple-
synthetic Eye of Truth. It's not
Yeah.
a real one that
Mhm.
Father tried to create
Yeah.
through gluttony.
Mm-hmm.
But his
Because he was trying
the-
to
the
access this
dimension-
in-between world and sort of take on the strange being they find in there, who is sort of implied to be quote unquote God. Weird stuff. It's sort of
It's
ambiguous.
kind of unclear, but
Yeah.
It's certainly like this being knows everything,
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
and the sort of the eye is the pathway to knowledge.
Yeah.
You see that in
Well,
Aristotle.
I think, and then like at the big climactic thing at the end where Edward is talking to this being, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll give up my alchemy in order to have his brother's body back." And the being is like, "All right, you get it." Like, I'm trying to think what was like the big thing there, where and then like it's also sort of the reckoning when to defeat Father, they kick his sort of like his base form, which is like this shadowy creature, he's sort of a shadow version of the light creature who banishes him to the void or whatever. He's like, you're greed in trying to become God and things like that. You are sucking up life and like destroying the balance of the universe. Instead of like obeying its rules or something has been your downfall or something like that. But Edward has understanding.
He understands the law of equivalent exchange.
Yeah.
He must give something up in order to succeed.
Yeah, and Father, his whole flaw is like he's trying to
Not
No
give
take.
anything up.
No take, only throw.
yeah.
But in order to become God, he opens this like gigantic eye of truth. It's
On
like
the
as
moon.
long as the planet.
Yeah.
You know, it's enormous. So
And eats the moon, sort of.
yeah. Oh, funny how all these shows are about gigantic and stealing the moon and
Yeah.
yeah.
Is
My favorite anime is Despicable Me.
yeah, I was gonna make a Despicable Me joke too. I'm going to steal the moon. That's the only Despicable Me movie worth watching. Anyway, it's the first one. But
The first one. Anyway.
second one's okay. Anyway, we're not
worth
talking
doing
about
an episode on.
So I guess, yeah, we can get into the Transcendentals. There's a whole lot to unpack in this show.
Oh yeah,
But what are some truths we as Catholics can draw from it?
like human souls, human life.
The
is
inestimable value of human life and the human
It's
soul.
valuable. It's
It
not.
can't be quantified.
It's not to be wasted. It's not to be manipulated. It's just. It should be respected and. Yeah.
Science can't encapsulate or explain the supernatural or manipulate the supernatural.
Yeah.
And sort of people's
It can help you access it. Like,
Yeah.
It's clearly shown that alchemy is sort of a way to reach the dimension of truth.
Mhm.
But it is a means of access rather than the sum total of what there is.
Which
And-
sort of mirrors the classical understanding of science, because the scientists of the Middle Ages and then the Enlightenment, a lot of them were like Catholic priests and people who were trying to better understand the universe, so better understand God, who is truth himself. So that is sort of reflected in that aspect of the show.
But when you start to do science things for the sake of science itself with no respect for anything else, you end up making some pretty messed up stuff.
You sin against nature and you sin against humanity and you sin against God. You create all sorts of nasty things, like in the show, sucking up an entire country to create philosopher's stones, and
Or using your daughter and a dog to make a talking
for the sake of
for
science.
chimeras. It's gross. It just was awful, but
Yeah.
really well put together.
Even though this show is sort of fantasy, it's sort of rooted in real human depravity in
Yeah.
terms of like the excesses of scientism.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say this show is kind of a commentary on.
So yeah, treat human life with respect.
That's like the main takeaway of the show. Science is good when used for its proper ends, but there has to be some sort of morality ruling over it in order for it not to go too far. Because then you end up with homunculi and chimeras, which raise real weird ethical questions, like is there any humanity here? What is the do they have an eternal soul and different things like that? It's just like it's crazy stuff.
The other big theme in the show is the law of equivalent exchange.
Yes.
Where, like, you can't get something from nothing.
Which is one of the laws of thermodynamics as well.
Right. So, like a human soul, you can't just get that from nothing. You've got to give something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, the main
You
villain...
have to give life to make life, I guess.
Right. So, Father, the main villain, was entirely dedicated to not giving anything up.
To
he only wanted
taking.
gain. right? But at the end of the show, you've got Edward, who makes a sacrifice, who makes an exchange to save his brother for somebody else.
And the thing he gives up is sort of
Very dear to him.
it is what makes him who he is. He is an alchemist. That
He's
sort
a
of defines
talented
him.
alchemist, yeah.
But
Beyond that, there isn't much that he's good at or can do. So
and also there's kind of that thing going on with Scar,
Yeah.
where his brother sacrifices himself to try and save his country and his family, and he dies. He gets mortally wounded in the process. And in order to save Scar, his brother, like, alchemically removed his own arm and transposed it onto his brother. That's how he has
Like
the
literally
destruction
sacrificed his body to save his brother's life.
arm. And I think he also gave him the creation arm on the other side. He just doesn't use it
Yep.
until the final battle.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you've got this brother sacrificing his own body, something of himself, to save his brother.
And Scar sort of learns that, in his quest for vengeance, he learns, like, this isn't even what he's doing, even though he claims to be pursuing justice by, killing one by one these alchemists who are responsible for atrocities of their own. He's like, okay, you can't achieve peace and balance by destroying. You also must create and give to the world things as well. So that's kind of his arc, more or less.
Yeah, destruction is part of nature, but so is growth, so is rebuilding.
So
You've
is
gotta
creation. Yeah.
balance.
Which is a lesson the boys learn when their teacher sends them off to an island.
Right, that's when they're first learning alchemy, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Because they have to
Participate in the cycle of the world in order to understand it more
in
fully.
order to survive,
It's
they
all
need
connected.
to decide to, like, hunt and kill other animals and take their life force essentially to sustain themselves. There's this circle of life.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing going on.
Yep.
So, a lot of, like, really neat, profound themes.
I'd say the other big kind of interpersonal theme is that of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. Edward and Elric learning to trust each other, to trust in authority, because they had kind of been a very independent pair forever, especially Edward. He's
Even
very
when that trust
insistent
and
upon
authority is sort of broken when they find out that the very leader of their country is a homunculi who's part of, like, the conspiracy to destroy their entire country. They still have people, their friends, who are the good people they can rely upon.
Right, so you've got
To teach them and
Mustang
as well as
his
help them.
crew who are, like, solid justice.
especially Lieutenant Hawkeye, who
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
he really has to trust, and she has to learn to trust him with, like, the secrets of flame alchemy that her dad sort of inscribed on her back. So,
Right, and which was also one of the things that caused Mustang was involved with
With the war, yeah.
the war with Ishval, and the flame alchemy made a big mess down there. So yeah, they have to learn to trust each other with that knowledge, that power. With great power comes great responsibility. Who knew?
Yeah. I guess any other truths we want to dig into? Okay. We kind of covered a lot of the goodness with the things we liked about the show.
Yeah.
What are some other things we haven't covered yet? It's well written. Maybe that goes more into the beauty. We'll get into that next. But I guess if there's nothing else really with goodness.
A lot of the goodness is that relationship between the brothers.
Yeah.
Their relationships with everyone else.
The redemption of the different characters in their own
right.
way.
Scar's redemption.
The sacrifice of all their friends and everyone to, like, sort of contribute to try to help save the country.
Right. And at the end, Ling, doesn't he give up power?
He gives up the Philosopher's Stone in greed, yeah.
Right. And it's implied he's not the one that gets the throne afterwards. So essentially he gave up the throne.
But he did sort of redeem his family.
Right. he
Through his
gained honor
feats.
for his family, and the girl who was the rival for the throne remembered that, and so
Yeah.
she's gonna honor that.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of characters ahead of
And
me.
also another aspect too is like there's sort of a reconciliation between Ishval and Amestris, and sort of rebuilding, like some sort of pledge to rebuild. Like the Mustang and all these people pledge to devote their lives to rebuilding Ishval and kind of undoing the harm that they had done.
Yeah, making up for the mistakes of the past war. Because
Effectively
that
genocide they committed against their people.
Right, which this genocide was orchestrated because the Philosopher's Stone and Father's plan, so it's all part of this huge picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Beauty. Well animated show.
Oh yes,
Well written. Great characters.
It's kind of beautiful in its realness.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very
it's-
grounded for a fantasy.
Right.
I mean, it gets downright grungy and uncomfortable.
It's grounded
at
in its
times.
humanity it captures, I think.
Right.
It's also not especially fantastic in its architecture.
No.
Or its I guess some of the forms of alchemy are a little more flashy, but usually they're just kind of rearranging concrete. So
They're
Right.
practical within the confines of the world, as it were.
There's some really fun, really well animated fight scenes, though.
Oh yeah.
oh my gosh, the one where Colonel Mustang is incinerating Lust.
Oh yeah.
That's
It's
one
just,
of
like,
my
deeply
favorite.
satisfying moments.
He is just absolutely going ham because Lust was
keeps
the one who
regenerating.
murdered a bunch of people. So yeah, she
Well,
can
Hughes
kind of,
especially. She murdered Maze Hughes specifically.
and that's what he was just enraged about.
Mm-hmm.
And she's about regenerating as fast as he can burn her. So he's just absolutely going to town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're kind of locked in a stalemate while the other people are kind of escaping this area. And I think, yeah,
You can destroy Philosopher's Stones, and I believe he does with her.
Right.
Just his rage allows him to overcome, to just put
she
more
had-
fire out that she can
Lust
handle.
had very nearly killed Lieutenant Hawkeye in that encounter too, I believe.
Right.
And she's
So
like,
it's
"Hey, check yourself.
part defending her.
You
part
don't want to
avenging
lose
his
your
friend.
you don't want to lose your humanity in this quest for vengeance here."
Mhm.
So yeah. Unity. It's all connected. The whole show. It's like
It always
Really
has
well
been.
thought out,
Always has
well
been.
written show.
yeah. But like, the order, the sort of uniting principle, like the part reveals the whole, like everything is connected in like a massive cycle.
Right. All the like concepts of alchemy and science that they use, like
The
really
law of equivalent exchange, everything must exist in
Right.
balance.
they all dictate the direction and the tone of the story,
Mhm.
right? So it's very centered on this idea of alchemy and the central mechanics and systems therein.
Mm-hmm. Another thing too, I guess, Hohenheim, who's the boy's father, also kind of gives up his immortality so he can die and be reunited with his wife, the boy's mother, who he truly, genuinely did love. Like, there's sort of some tension between him and them because, like, they don't understand why he left their family and then their mother died while he was gone and he didn't even come back for the funeral, that type of thing. So there's some conflict there. But he's sort of, in giving up this unnaturally gained immortality, he regains his humanity and sort of has his own redemption in a way.
Because like living forever is pointless if you don't have something to live for.
Mm-hmm. A family to love. And the boy's mother kind of taught him that.
Right.
Because he'd lived for like 100 years or whatever at that point. And he finally learned. And like he didn't age because, immortality and whatnot. But
Yeah.
or obscenely long life, however you want to look at it. But yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Can recommend.
Yes.
I mean, the majority of the things we talk about, we feel like we
that-
can recommend. But
we talk about them because we recommend them.
yeah, this is
Although,
our
With this
recommendation.
particular show, there's kind of a weird caveat because we're specifically talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yeah,
Right.
There
There's Fullmetal Alchemist, just plain Fullmetal Alchemist.
don't
was
watch the
written-
live action version.
Don't
That's 'cause-
don't do that to yourself. Just don't.
Just
But-
just Brotherhood.
Plain Fullmetal Alchemist was written several years before that, and it was kind of coming out contemporaneously with the manga.
Mhm.
So they kind of got ahead of the manga and didn't know where to take the plot, so they came up with their own ending,
Mhm.
which is good in its own right, but it is very different than the way it ends in Brotherhood, which
And
is,
yeah.
Which came
faithful
out
to
what?
what
Yeah, it came out
considerably
much
later.
Yeah.
And after the manga had ended, so they knew the ending, so they.
Mhm. And it was a much
so they
more
so
fitting
they stuck
ending.
with it.
Oh, I don't know how the other show ended. I didn't watch it.
It's very different. It works, but it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend that you watch Brotherhood first, and then if you want, like, it basically follows the same plot up until it doesn't. So
Mhm. Well, it's the same animation studio and whatnot too, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. But yeah, finally covered it. This was sort of the part of the podcast origin story was this show, so kind of near and dear to us. Subscribe, or no, well, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, because I'm doing the posting things now, so keep your eye out. Kind of like the little bit I did this week. You can follow us on Spotify and listen. Yeah, Spotify, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. You can email us with your questions, comments, concerns, or complaints at palladiumpapist@gmail.com. If you have any suggestions for new episodes, hit us up. We'd love to cover something if you think it would kind of fit with our shtick. Yeah, we appreciate you listening. Tell your friends. Tell them to tell their friends. And, yeah, we will catch you in the next episode. Farewell.
Bye.
See ya.